Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and use my headphone mic for this video just because I feel the audio was a little off in the last one. But I'm just going to get right into the questions. So one of the first ones posted in the last video was by, let's see if I can find it real quick. Okay, it was by YouTube2344, and he asked, explain this. Why does God, an infinite being with infinite potential, choose to send itself to sacrifice itself for its own satisfaction, forgiveness of sins? Do you not recognize the stupidity in that? This being can literally do anything, but it chooses to do the most primitive thing known to humanity, taking life in fear of punishment, sacrifice. Is it not more logical to assume that the emperor at the time made this Jesus teacher into a god so the church can take control? Um, First, I'm going to start off by saying that's a great question. The simple answer to that is love, God's love. Um, the first part of that question again was explain why God, an infinite being with infinite potential, chooses to send itself to sacrifice itself for its own satisfaction. I don't really like saying own satisfaction in the way he said it, because it, it kind of makes God seem a little weird. But I'm going to rephrase that because it is true into satisfaction because of the love he receives from us. I'm going to use the story, a story of a father and son driving in a car together. And they're both driving, and the windows are down because it's a hot summer day or whatever. And a bee flies into the car. So the son gets scared because he sees the bee. Well, the father, driving on the freeway, doesn't really have time to pull over and chase it away. So he just quickly grabs the bee with his hand, holds it for a second, waits for the sting, and then lets the bee go. Now the child's still scared, but the dad shows the son that he's got a stinger in his hand, signifying that the bee cannot hurt anybody anymore. So in that story, the father sacrificed himself. You could say it wasn't death, but it was, he took the sting for the child. He knew it was going to sting him. He knew it was going to hurt. He didn't have to do it, but he chose to do it to save his son. And the satisfaction he received was the salvation, the saving, and the love the son gave him. In the same way, even though God is an infinite being with unlimited power, he loves us so much that he chose to take that sting, take that sacrifice for us. In return, we gain his love. And that's a really simple explanation of it. But I think that's the beauty of Christianity, is the fact that God would do that. That, look at this. I mean, we are so, if God's so powerful, we are nothing compared to him. And yet, he chooses to take the form of man, to die the most horrific death of the time, which is dying on the cross, for us. I mean, that's just amazing. This just blows my mind every time I think about it. Now, he says, is it stupid? And I wouldn't say it's stupid for a father to take the sting so his son doesn't have to. That's not stupid. That's just a loving father. I feel the same can be said about God in this situation. And I just want to correct him on the last thing he said, which was that it's not more logical to assume that the emperor at the time made this Jesus teacher into a god so the church could take control. This is just not even close to being true. The Jewish church at the time already had control. They were in control. Everyone in the politics was Jewish. So for the church to say take control, that's not true. The church already had control. In fact, it was the church, the Jewish church, that really killed Jesus because they were worried. They were just getting mad at his teachings because to him, or to the church, Jesus was blaspheming because he was claiming that he was God, which he was, but the Jewish church didn't like that, so they had him killed. And so the emperor had nothing to do with it. And the Jewish church wouldn't have anything to do with making up a story that he was God, because they wouldn't do that. That would go against everything they are. So that whole thinking isn't really reasonable at all. But a good question nonetheless, and I hope that answers it. If not, you can refine your question or correct something I said. Another question I want to touch on was by unknown user 356, and he said, it doesn't make sense to him. Why would an omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent God demand a sacrifice, as in Exodus 29:19 through 26? Why was blood and the burnt entrails of animals a pleasing aroma to the Lord, and how did it satisfy God? And he says, I think it is understandable that primitive people would have found cooked meat to have a pleasing aroma, and the spilling of blood making a fine offering, but not a real deity. Again, another great question. I'm going to start off by saying, even though it is a good question, that's technically your opinion on God. There's no evidence or contradictions there at all. It's just your opinion on what you think God should be, which is fine to have that, but you got to understand that seeing as there's no contradiction in that, or there's no evidence or anything that kind of goes against that other than your opinion, it's not really a valid point. But I'm going to address it nonetheless because it is a good question. Um, in that time, there were two things. One, blood was obviously seen as a life source. Without it, things died. With it, things lived. It was very clear back then. People of the ancient times didn't know much, but they knew without blood, you couldn't live. So it was seen as the life source for all living things. And the idea of an offering to God did a couple things. It showed devotion, and it showed kind of like just a kind of humility to God. Also, the offerings were always the cream of the crop. It was always the finest and richest lamb. It was the pick of the pick of the crop. If it was vegetables, it was always the finest and biggest crops. And in that way, it was showing that God deserves the very best. Because if you think about it, that's all we had to offer. Other than our lives, there was nothing else back then for them to give them besides their finest lamb and their nicest crops. So that was really all we could give God, and so that's what He demanded, was the very best. It obviously God actually I lost it. I had a verse, but it says somewhere that where God's talking about offerings, and I believe it's Exodus or Leviticus. He says, "I have enough burnt offerings. I don't need this." But what it is it's showing commitment and devotion to God, and it serves both as showing that you're devoted to God, and it also acts at the time, because it was before Jesus, as a temporary sacrifice and a temporary way to apologize, kind of in a way. So God used that and took the offering as a sign of forgiveness for our sins. This was obviously before Jesus came and became the permanent sacrifice. This served as a temporary sacrifice they did on, I think it was a weekly basis, I think. Like, I don't know exactly those facts. But so yeah, again, God said He didn't need these offerings at all. But what they did is it showed to God that the people were devoted and to God, and that they gave Him everything. They gave Him the best of what He could give them. So I hope that kind of answers the question. Again, if not, please refine your question, or let me know if I missed something. I'll be happy to do my best to answer it. So those are the two questions I want to answer this time. There was a couple more, but I think I'm going to do them in another video just for time-wise. So yeah, again, this channel, you can ask anything. You can ask biblical questions. If you just want to do like creationist questions, there were a couple questions there just about age of the earth and stuff like that. And you know what? I'll just go ahead and just throw that in real quick. The Zoo Crew asked just different aspects of creationism, I believe, such as the age of the earth and the literacy or literal translation of the Bible, such as a giant flood. The age of the earth is kind of a weird topic because it is not clearly defined in the Bible. Genesis says 6 days. However, the Hebrew translation, the original translation for that word day, translates to more accurately period of time. So obviously period of time could be 10 years, 100 years, million years. It's impossible. That's kind of a just debate that's kind of going in and out of creationists themselves who believe in the Bible. It's just exactly how long, how old the earth is based on the Bible. Because it's really hard to tell, I really don't find it of too importance. Personally, I believe the earth is on the younger side, but definitely not 1,000 years. There's just too much happened for it to be just a few thousand years. So I definitely think it's quite a bit older than that. As for the stories of the Bible, I do believe they're all true. I believe in a flood. I believe in all that stuff. So Yeah, if you have questions about that, I'll do my best to answer them. Definitely some great comments were posted. Keep them up. And again, if I didn't answer those questions as well as you would have liked, let me know. I'll try to do better. And keep asking questions. This is fun. So thanks.